It's the Forever Knight-A-Thon Season 2. We're recapping and reviewing every single episode of Season 2 of the 1990s Canadian police procedural Forever Knight, about a vampire detective taking a bite at a crime. Season 2, Episode 6, Capital Offense, is the exception to the rule I proposed last year, that the quality of a Forever Knight episode is directly proportional to the degree that Nick's vampirism is central to the story. This episode would play out largely the same if Nick were not a vampire, but it's actually a pretty good little crime drama. The story focuses on Laura, an escaped convict from Texas, where she was found guilty of her boyfriend's murder most foul. Laura is captured by Nick and Schanke in Toronto and brought into holding so she can be sent back to death row, all while maintaining her innocence. Nick, of course, is immediately in love with Laura and wants to protect her from this fate. He starts investigating further into the case against the wishes of Captain Cohen and Schanke, who has a big fishing trip planned, and he wants to go on that fishing trip, you see, because it makes his wife very horny to fish. Schanke has a whole thing. Schanke's plot this episode, Schanke's little B plot this episode, is that he wants to go on a fishing trip, but Nick keeps distracting him trying to save this woman's life. And the fishing trip is very important because fishing makes his wife super horny.
Myra responds heatedly to the call of the wild, if you get my drift. Fishing triggers the spawning instinct in her.
Go ahead and add that to the wiki, folks. Schanke's wife is horny from fishing. That's established lore now. Nick has this gut feeling that he can trust Laura and thinks back to a time when someone showed him a similar trust. While on the lam from vampire hunters, Nick hid in the back of a church, despite that being shown to totally killify him in season 1. There he meets a kindly nun who shelters him because, he gives off good vibes. Nick has no good reason to trust Laura, but then again, the nun had no real good reason to trust him either. Nonetheless, he sees good in her and decides to put himself on a limb to protect her. Laura's a likable character. She's unassuming and conveys a real sorrow at her position, without coming across as maudlin. She has this nice little exchange with one of the guards at the lockup about how much she wants a cigarette, and you can see her reaching out sincerely for some sort of human connection, only to see how her status as a convicted murderer, whether or not she actually committed the crime, has made her persona non grata. Nick is the only person willing to hear her out, willing to even check her story. Luckily for Nick's investigation, all of the people involved in this Texas murder now find themselves in Toronto. Otherwise, that would have been real inconvenient. That would have taken forever. Unluckily, however, the only person who could have corroborated Laura's story is now totally dead, completely murderfied. Natalie is unable to conclusively give a time of death. What a shock. Natalie's not being helpful. So it's entirely possible Laura offed this guy too before she got arrested. Nobody knows. Back in the flashback, we find out that unbeknownst to Nick, LaCroix has also sought refuge in this particular church, fleeing the same vampire hunters. He's immediately weird about Nick's new nun friend, and Nick is not having it. He demands that LaCroix not corbel her, and LaCroix agrees in a characteristically sinister fashion.
I have no taste for holiness in any of its forms. It plays havoc with my digestion.
In the present, LaCroix is back on the radio as the Nightcrawler, urging people to call in and trust him with their worst secrets. Whenever they play LaCroix on the radio, you gotta think is this LaCroix's job? Is he being paid to do this? Does LaCroix receive a paycheck and go to the bank? Does LaCroix pay taxes?
Trust me, because I am the Nightcrawler.
Trust is the watchword of this episode. This episode explores the nature of trust from many angles. Nick and Laura trusting one another, the nun trusting Nick, Nick trusting LaCroix, Schanke and Captain Cohen trusting Nick, Nick trusting his gut, etc. Sometimes trusting someone is a necessary risk. The nun is right to trust Nick, who does go out of his way to protect her. Nick is, of course, wrong to trust LaCroix, who immediately gorbles the nun, the very second he can.
Trust is a very human venture, flawed and doomed.
He then tries to turn that into some sort of lesson about how Nick should only ever trust his own kind.
Best reserve your trust for your own kind.
What? The nun didn't betray Nick, LaCroix, you did. Of course, the big question through this episode is whether or not Nick is right to trust Laura. She's due to be extradited, but as Nick is literally driving her to the plane where she'll be sent back to death row, they manage to track down the man Laura has fingered as the real killer. So he makes the leap of faith, deciding to investigate rather than bringing her to be sent to Murder Town. But it turns out he was being manipulated the whole time. Laura had killed her boyfriend with this guy, and that guy let her take the full blame for it. And so she's just out for revenge. That's all she wanted. And she manages to kill this guy and is fatally wounded in the scuffle, dying in Nick's arms, and then really twists the knife with a line of dialogue so cold it genuinely gave me chills.
I couldn't have done without you.
I love this shot of the camera pulling up through the ceiling fan. It really hammers in the feeling of powerlessness and betrayal Nick is feeling here. This reveal caught me by surprise. Like, I was convinced that Forever Knight would not take a swing like this. The idea that Nick trusting Laura is the wrong call, that his sense of empathy and compassion might occasionally lead him to the wrong conclusions, feels far too morally ambiguous for a show like this. And furthermore, the conclusion that Nick reaches, that the value of trust is worth occasionally having that trust violated, is a mature, nuanced point that I wouldn't have expected them to approach. It's so much more meaningful that Nick is wrong to trust Laura, and that he ultimately decides he would rather be wrong than lose his ability to trust people. Because there is no trust without risk, and there can be no connection without trust. We still shouldn't be like the mean guard who wouldn't give Laura a cigarette just because her judgment of Laura happened to be correct. We should be like the nice nun, even though her trust of Nick happened to be the wrong choice for her. Even though it hurts to be betrayed, we have to take that risk in order to be human. Nick doesn't get to have it both ways. Being human means being vulnerable. That's the price you pay. And it actually makes him seem like a much more heroic and nuanced character for him to recognize that, to not let the cruelty of the world harden him against people. And the real victim in all of this is Schanke's wife, who doesn't get to be horny about fishing. Let's not lose sight of that.
Fishing triggers the spawning instinct in her.
Tomorrow, Nick and Schanke investigate a serial killer who's hunting people for sport. What a jerk! I want to give a special thank you to my web puppets over on Patreon. We've got Wolfman Jack, Cooper Holmes, Joe McClory, Liz Widow, C.H. Phillips, Gideon, David Kaler, and Andrew Roger. And I, Bobby Duke, the star of the channel, would like to thank these other people who's also the stars of the channel. We got Jay Torney, Connor Patrick Griffin, Rachel Ratt, Kato Moore, Carpad, Josh Manes, and Hyla Tracy. Hope you're enjoying this Forever Knight shit that Mildo insists on doing every year. I don't really get it myself. I don't know, I'm trying to reduce my screen time. That's just me, though, you know? Like, who cares about some show from the 90s nobody's ever heard of?